right. Well, good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to all of our beautiful viewers around the globe. And thank you so much for joining us. Of course, always subscribe if you feel pulled to my YouTube channel, and yeah, share any information that we put out there as much as possible, just to build the community. That would be wonderful. And today we have another intimate conversation, and today's guest is the gorgeous Kim Knight. And thank you so much, Kim, for saying yes to coming in.
Oh, thank you. It's very nice to be called gorgeous.
Gorgeous inside and out, of course. So I'll just introduce you, Kim, to the viewers, for anybody who doesn't know you. So Kim regards herself as a student of life, here to learn about human consciousness and evolution. The older she gets, the more she realizes how much she doesn't know and has to learn, and the harder it becomes to label herself as any particular type of therapist or coach. I so totally agree with that, Kim. Absolutely on point. Her interests lie in understanding and exploring how to connect with our higher selves, cultivate authentic joy and happiness, and be of service to humanity. She is trained in multiple cutting-edge, so-called alternative therapies, which focus on emotional healing and transformation of consciousness, including motivational medicine, lifestyle medicine, advanced clearing energetics, AHA energy alignment, multiple brain integration, REN-sway human, life science, and more. She currently lives in the beautiful South Island of New Zealand, and absolutely beautiful place to be. So, Kim, many things in there that I'd like to discuss with you, and what you've just trained in and all those things, if we get there. But one of the things that I start with is, were you an aware or awakened child, to this that we're doing and why we're here and all those sorts of things? Were you that when you were a child?
No, I wouldn't have called myself an awake child, but I was very sensitive. But interestingly enough, one thing that I do remember happening or doing every night when I went to bed, and then it stopped at a certain age. I don't know what age it stopped. It might have been around 6 or 7. But one thing I remember very clearly, and unfortunately I can't do it anymore, but I'm sure I could, somehow come to do it again, is I would lie down and close my eyes and focus on the third eye. Of course, I didn't know it was the third eye. I would focus there, close my eyes, and go inwards, and I would find myself in outer space. And I would be floating around in the universe, whatever we want to call it. And I would be inside a dodecahedron. And it felt like the safest place to ever be. It was just so comforting. And that was the place that I went to every night when I went to bed. And, and then I would fall asleep at some point.
Yeah.
And then at some point, I stopped doing it without even knowing that I stopped doing it.
Yeah. Wow, that's awesome. I remember going down into like a speck, like a pinhead, and then expanding right out. That would just sort of, it wasn't like I was trying to do that. It just would happen at points in time when I was trying to go to sleep and things. So yeah, it was very interesting. I had no idea.
Well, in Ren Shui, we talk about certain movements of the universe, and one is the in and the out.
Right.
So out, coming in. We do that a lot in the practices. We go out to the universe, becoming one with the universe, coming back into the body, going out into the universe, coming back into the body. So it sounds like you were doing that, maybe.
Yeah, that's probably what it was. I remember seeing something written somewhere, or somebody speaking about the pin, coming down as size of a pinhead. And I don't know what they were saying. I can't remember the conversation anymore, but yeah, it was interesting. I thought, oh yeah, somebody else has been doing that too.
I also remember, and I don't know if I still have it because it will be on an old computer, but somebody had this Excel spreadsheet where you could keep going out and out and out and out and out, further out, getting bigger, 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 and then you could work it the other way. And when I say spreadsheet, it was actually like a visual, or it was just done in an Excel spreadsheet. And then you could go smaller, smaller, smaller down to, cells, atoms, quantum. That was very fascinating as well.
Yes, lots of great things to do and explore. I love playing with energy and just seeing what we're able to do and how we're able to do it.
Well, apparently it's infinite in both directions.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah.
Which is mind-boggling, really.
It is, It is. I mean, yeah. Oh, it is. It's just exciting. And I love exploring it, seeing what else. It's like, yeah, okay, well, what else now? And it's good to be a questioner, though. I really think it's a time and place in this world at this moment, isn't it, to question?
Absolutely.
Yeah, question everything, and I always have, so it's been good for me. But if you're not that sort of person, it's can be a little bit walking into traps, really, at this time, isn't it? Yeah. So how has life been for you, Kim? Like, how are you navigating your way through these big changes, because they're huge changes that we're in? And I know for me, in the last probably 3 weeks or so, 4 weeks, it, like, energetically, things have really changed up again, and it's now like I find myself adjusting to how this is and what this is again now, and the way that my body feels and how it's sitting. Yeah.
I feel like I'm still coming to grips with what is happening, because it's happening rather than happened.
It is.
And there's that marker point that everybody refers to, when COVID started, March 2020, and it was a significant moment in time, our lifetimes anyway.
Yeah.
And beyond that too. And what's interesting for me personally is that there's been the collective whatever is going on, and that's a lot. And that has coincided with what's been going on for me personally, which feels like it's amplified everything.
Yeah.
And for me personally, I went through menopause, I don't know, 4 or 5 years ago was when I started, and I was quite a late, I think, into menopause compared to some people, and I think feel quite grateful for that, bearing in mind what I've been going through.
Yeah.
But for me, mainly, it's not so much the biological shifts, although that's part of it. It's the coming into a new stage of life.
Yes.
Which is not really talked about or recognized in our culture. It may be in, so-called third world cultures or indigenous cultures. I'm sure it's very recognized, like these rites of passage that people take, in a teenager or motherhood or this third stage of life, where I'm finding that I'm no longer wanting to live and operate the way that I have done for the past 40, 50 years. Which for me was work.
Yeah.
And so programmed since, teenagedom, what are you going to do when you grow up? What work are you going to do? All these questions, you get when you're a teenager or at university. What are you going to do when you grow up? What are you going to do when you leave school? Have you decided what career you want? That was just the main focus, wasn't it? Anyway, for me at school and university. And the funny thing was, at school and university, well, when I was at school, I hadn't got a clue what I wanted to do afterwards. And when I was at university, I hadn't got a clue what I wanted to do afterwards. And I just found myself sort of moving into a job and then into another job and then into another job and into another, field. But the whole thing was, it's about work. you go to work and you earn a living, and that's what life is about. And then at some point maybe you meet somebody and you get married and you have 2.2 children, although I don't know how you'd have 2.2 children, but you know
Yeah.
that saying goes, right? And the white picket fence.
Yeah.
And when I was about 26, that myth was shattered, and I thought, you know what, I don't think I'm fitting the mold. And but even so, it's still been the work. And I'm just seeing life differently at the moment, because rather than most of my life being in front of me, which is how it's always been in my mind, it's not. Most of it is now behind. And so you're facing the reality of this finiteness of life, and how am I gonna spend the rest of my precious days, weeks, months, years, whatever. You know, what do I want to focus on? And I haven't got a definitive answer on that yet, but it's just a shift in perspective of, yeah, recognizing this finiteness of life, and the fact that I don't want to just be thinking about work all the time. Yeah, and how am I going to, you know, and then of course that overlaps with what's happening now in the world, with all these massive changes that have been going on. And I mean, as soon as COVID hit, I saw, wow, this is a collective version of what people have been going through individually, and it's a wake-up call. And you know, we needed to be brought to a halt.
Yeah.
Because and that's what happens, you know, because I've been working for years with people individually where their lives are brought to a halt and they can't function anymore because they're so sick. And the reason for that was because they needed to stop and look at, you know, what was it they needed to change or heal. So it's exactly the same with the whole world. Is okay, what do we need to change? What do we need to heal? And my Qigong teacher has been, you know, ranting on for years about, you know, we've really got to change it up and pull our finger out and do things differently and wake up and work on ourselves and la la la. But you know, every time we have a workshop or a retreat, is like, is humanity getting the lesson yet? Well, no, not really.
Yeah.
So while some people are still thinking, I want to go back to, you know, how it was. And I saw a great quote the other day, can't remember it exactly, but it was something along the lines of, there is no going back to some comfortable, you know, whatever place.
No.
And so we're in this place of unknown and exponential change that is happening at the rate of knots.
Yeah.
Especially with all the AI and tech and these potentially, you know, transhumanistic agendas, which for me are the most unnatural, crazy, for me personally, undesirable, you know, ways to go. But that's me at my age. It's like, maybe young people want that, you know, maybe they want to live in a metaverse and live with goggles on their head. And I even saw an ad. What was it? No, it wasn't an ad. It was a thing on Facebook just 2 days ago. And it was at a theme park where somebody was going down a water slide. But they had the you know, the VR goggles on. Right. And so as they were going down the water slide in real life, what they were seeing was, you know, going through a jungle or whatever it was, you know. It's like, why can't you just go down a water slide? You know?
Yeah.
Well, am I getting really old and boring, you know?
Yeah, I know it is. It's pretty crazy, isn't it? And I think, you know, when I'm pretty much like, allow everyone to be where they need to be, to learn what it is they need to learn, if that's what it is they need to do, you know, and sort of, well, none of my business, whatever they're doing is none of my business. But it's got to a point, and particularly this trans thing, you know, all the identity stuff is like, when are we going to say no? When are we going to say, no, that's actually not okay? And to be pushing it, you know, because it's okay, you do your thing if that's what you want to do, but don't push it on our kids, particularly, my goodness. And you know, or anyone really, because that fits you doesn't mean it fits everyone. It doesn't. But it's sort of got to, you know, like the Guardians of the Galaxy movies and places like that, those sorts of movies, and they've got those planets they go to, and there's just all these crazies. They're all different types of monsters, and they're all just weird looking and strange and different. And I think this is where we're heading. If we don't start holding on to our authentic selves and really honing in on the inner world rather than that outer world, we're heading in that way. It's just going to get crazier and crazier.
Well, the interesting thing about, these weird animal, well, I don't know, animals, but
Yeah.
beings
Beings.
you refer to is, there's a guy called Michael Rhodes who I think it might even have been the first ever personal development workshop. Oh no, it wasn't the first, but it was right back in 1997. I started doing serious personal development growth in 93. And in 97, Michael Rhodes came. He's Australian. He came to New Zealand, and he's written quite a few books. And he has had many experiences in other dimensions, and he's written about them in these books. And I remember when I first read them thinking, oh my God, this guy is mad, because literally what he was describing was what they show on Star Trek. Literally beings, weird and wonderful looking beings. I'm not sure that's where they are wanting us to go at this point on this physical plane reality. But from what I understand, they are wanting to merge tech with humans. And it seems to me that a lot has been foretold in movies with people, because I remember when I was, on my series, which I did recently, I interviewed David Whitehead, who produced the series The Cult of the Medics, which is an incredible series about the true history. I don't really like the title, but the content is amazing. It's about the true history of medicine. And one of the things he said was, yeah, well, they put it in movies because people think movies are fantasy, and so they won't really believe it, but actually they're foretelling the future in movies. Well, I've always felt over the last 10-15 years, actually even longer, back to 30 years, if you think about when The Matrix came out, and other movies, and even maybe longer than that, 40-50 years, is that some of the stuff that has been in movies seems like completely impossible or unlikely, and yet now we're seeing, if you look back at some of these older movies and you're thinking, wow, well, that's happened and that's happened and that's happened. And I just saw today on my Facebook feed the movie Wag the Dog, the trailer for that, which I never saw, but I'm going to watch it now, because that's all about how they apparently they created this completely fake war to take the attention off the fact that the president was having an affair, something like that.
Right.
It's all about the fake media that they created. And we know that it's happened and it's happening.
Absolutely. Yeah, for sure it is. Yeah, it is. And I mean, more and more of it is coming to light as such too, isn't it? More and more people are actually recognizing that this is happening. I mean, it takes a lot to get our human head around it, for sure, and adjust our mind to the fact that everything that we thought was this way is actually this way. Was like turned inside out, turned right around, upside down, and it's completely changed. And I mean, I just don't believe a thing that anyone says outside of those who I know. And like I say, I've been a questioner all my life, so I always question.
Oh, it is definitely. I mean, so many things I want to say. One thing is Boston Legal. I rewatched the series Boston Legal, I don't know, a year ago, and at one of the episodes he's in New Orleans and he's trying to try a case there, but they think very differently in New Orleans, so you have to do it, you have to win, you have to do things very differently. And one of the lawyers says to the other lawyer, what's up is down and down is up. And for me, one of the biggest shifts that I've gone through in the last 3 years is this new understanding of how the world has been working and how it's been working for decades and even centuries, but I was oblivious to it. I was completely naive. And you know, when I did my bigger picture series, that was part of it, is what I did, what I call a joining the dots exercise, because I've been joining the dots.
Yeah.
Of all these different industries, for want of a better word. So big tech, big banking, big oil, big climate, big media, you know, big politics, big war. There are just so many different, you know, sectors.
Yeah.
And looking at what are big drugs, what has actually really been going on behind the scenes. And even just yesterday, the movie, was it The Sound of Freedom, came out, which is all about the truth about what do you call it, child trafficking. And it's exceeded the, you know, it's exceeded the income of Indiana Jones, which was released recently, in just, you know, one day. And yeah, so all this stuff that has been going on, that a lot of us have been oblivious to, is now coming out. It is being revealed. The curtain is being pulled back.
Yes.
And a lot of people are seeing it. A lot of people are still not seeing it. They're still sort of heads down, bum up.
They are,
you know, trying to carry on, get back to life as normal, which, as we know, it's not going to happen. But for me, it's been such a process to learn about all this information that I didn't know about. And I sort of learn about one sector, you know, whether it's like, say, I've done a lot of exploration myself, because it's my area of interest anyway, into understanding the true history of medicine, which is really shocking. And when you see that, then you understand why the food industry creates so much junk food to keep us sick. And my goodness, it's all deliberate, which is, you know, the really scary thing, is that people can be so evil. And there's a bigger reason behind that, of course, as well. But you know, I've been watching this information bit by bit by bit, and I've probably watched about 1,000 videos of information that I initially had no interest in watching. It's like, no, I just want to get on with my work. I want to see my clients. I want to create my online programs. I want to have my social life. I'm really not interested in looking at this, but these videos kept on coming across my path, and then I'd watch and I go, oh, that's actually quite interesting. But at times it's like I've got to this point of like, I can't take anymore. You know, this is just too much. And then I have to sort of take a break and integrate. And I remember in particular, this was about the early 21, and I was watching a series by Kenneth Cousins, from Gemstone University. And he had a series, or has a series, it's a 17-part series called Putting It All Together, or something like that. And he has different series, but it was this particular one. And I got to number 3, and I was like, oh my God, I can't, this is too much. This is just this revelation of truth is just too much. I think I'm going to have to take at least a 2 or 3 week break before I can go on to number 4.
Yes.
And I went to bed that night, and I must have integrated quite well, because I woke up the next day and I was like, right, I'm on to the next one. Because it's like watching a Netflix series where you just want to see the next episode. But I've watched so much stuff and it's had to be over a period of time, because it literally would have blown my mind if it was given to me in one go.
This is it. Yeah. And I know when I've relayed things to somebody, you know, they've asked a question, and then I go into relay and what I understand it to be. And I think, you know, this is just sort of sounds so nutty. It's a huge thing to get our head around, and to come, like you say, integrate it and allow it to be, the truth for you, because it is the truth. And but when you try and relay it to someone else who isn't seeing it like that, it does sound nuts, and you do sound like you've lost the plot somewhere along the line, and you're a freak.
Yeah, and it literally is. I mean, it's interesting that the Matrix, I can't remember if it was 93 or 97, the first one, it was somewhere around there. And, you know, when Neo, you know, he had the choice of going into the Matrix, and it was a harrowing, shocking, unpleasant experience.
Yeah, that's right.
just like when we face our own shadow, because really it's the collective shadow we're talking about here.
Totally. Absolutely. Yeah.
You know, it's not pleasant to face our own shadow. And it's almost less pleasant, I would say, to face the collective shadow.
Totally.
But this is what humanity has to do. And that shadow has been there all along and we've been oblivious to it. So it literally is. I literally saw when they announced the lockdown, it was like, and this whole pandemic, scandemic thing, it was like, okay, collective version of personal, work in personal development work is going on here.
Yeah. And I as part of one of my programs that I run in numerology, which was gifted to me through, I call it Creator, it came in with a different way of reading it, which is a soul purpose journey. And so in that, I go over the 13 codes of ascension. And we, in the beginning, we were one and everything was one with us. And then we go through these processes of dimensions were created, blah, blah, blah. And over time, eons and eons of time, we were now in the 12th code, which is where we're discovering that we've been co-creating together, but by default, because we didn't realize we were as such. And now we're awakening to that fact, and we realize that what we create is absolutely affecting everyone else in the planet and the whole system. So therefore, there's this awakening now where, and this is where we're up to, is discovering that we've actually created all of this by default because we didn't understand what we were actually doing. And we were learning to co-create together and how we've been doing that. So now it's this opportunity, and this is all I see, is that we now have this opportunity to really come into the understanding of that co-creation and how we all do this, and our aware self, and start actually creating it in a more positive way rather than through that dark shadow place that we've been creating from. And this one coming back to the oneness, where we're one with everything and everything's one with us. And the only way we can get there is by deeply loving ourselves, making ourselves important and we're to us. And we have really been taught to, it's about everyone else and it's not about us so much. It's that we have to give and make sure everyone else is okay. And, we do that with family and we do it, in jobs. We're just, in our workspace. And so it's now coming back to self. And that's huge. It's a huge thing. And it's taken me years to actually be okay with receiving, and that's another thing. Humanity's not good at receiving, it's all about giving to others, never mind you. So it's a huge turnaround. It's really big, but it's a great thing. I love it. I'm glad that we're here, and I see the space where I was as a kid. I can now understand why I did life the way I did it, because I was meant to do it that way. I wasn't meant to be trying to fit into that system. And I was saying to somebody else the other day that all these young ones that have got major anxiety stuff going on that's hindered their lives, for forever, basically. And they were supposed to, I believe, because it stopped them from being in that world. It stopped them from, I'm too anxious to even go and get a job, those sorts of things. So it's kept them out of that system in many ways. I see that now and I think, man, this is so meant to be. None of us were meant to be in that space, but of course we are and we have, and now it's pulling the plug. And, where to from here? Where do you feel things are heading, Kim? Like, do you have a world that you envision that we're going to be? Imagine, I sort of think, where are we heading? If we're heading into this amazingness that we are, we won't need this form. I know we're here to do it in this form. So, I suppose we just hold on to the form and we create the way that we can out of form, but in it.
Well, it's interesting because in the Ageless Wisdom teachings, which I've been studying on and off for 20 plus years, they give this much, 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 much bigger picture of the history of the world, of the universe. I mean, beyond imaginably big.
Yeah.
And and it's interesting because they have what are called globes and rounds and schemes, and planets go through different evolutions, and there's different levels of evolution at each level. You know, we might be developing the mind here, or the emotions there, or whatever, and it's hard to sort of show it without a picture, and B, because it's so complex I can't even describe it very well myself. For example, in Lemuria, the ages of Lemuria and Atlantis, especially Lemuria, we weren't fully physical beings. And then we come into physicality, and then we move out of physicality again. So from that perspective, from the way that they, you know, these teachings teach history, is that it's part of natural evolution and involution to go in and out of material existence.
Right. Yeah.
But that's over very, 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 very long periods of time. We're talking millions and billions and trillions of years.
Yeah.
I tend not to spend my time thinking in those lengths of time. For me personally, I would just like to see people treating people and nature and animals and the planet with more respect and love. And one of the main focuses of the Ren Shui teachings, which is what I've been predominantly following since 2009, when I met Wan Sir, who is the creator of these teachings, and he is a self-realized, enlightened person of a very high degree, and as far as I understand, it's not until one reaches enlightenment, true self-realization, where one is in this state of unity consciousness, that one can actually really see what we need to do, you know, what is the right path. Yeah. And the reason for that is that when one reaches that state of consciousness, one has what is called true wisdom. So humanity has to move from ignorance, which means, you know, being unaware of reality, of truth, of what is the right way to live, you know, versus the wrong way to live. Yeah. And our journey is to move from ignorance to wisdom up the ladder of self-realization. And so when you reach, as far as I understand, you know, that state of consciousness, in his words, he says, you know, life begins again and everything is completely different. You just perceive everything and are experiencing everything in a completely different way. Yes. And one of the reasons for that is that one is operating from, or merged with, or guided by and from the true self rather than the false self. Yes. So the true self being spirit, as opposed to the, you know, our normal physical, uneducated humanness. And so when we're at that state of consciousness, and I'm sure a lot of your viewers know this, but we cannot do harm because we are one, we are that. I am you, you are me, therefore we cannot harm another. Yeah. And the higher, how can I say, the higher our consciousness goes, the bigger the consequences are for breaking the laws of life and the laws of health. And so when we're merged with, or we are our true self, then we're in a place of harmony. We're living in harmony with the Tao, as they say in the ancient Chinese philosophy. And there is harmony, there is peace, there is joy. And in the Ren Shui system, that they say there are 5 treasures that we really should be seeking. So it's not about, you know, the money, or the, you know, money in the bank, or your car, or your house, or whatever. The 5 treasures are health, happiness, well-being, growth, and service to others. And that is what, makes us actually feel happy and be healthy.
Yeah.
So for me, all I can, my next step is, or for the world, is just seeing a world like that. Now, how we get there and how long it takes us to get there, and will we get there in a direct line, or will we go and destroy ourselves like previous civilizations? Because exactly what's happening right now, the transhumanism thing, that the consciousness not being ready for the inventions that we're creating.
Yeah.
The greed, we talk a lot in Ren Shui about patterns of consciousness, and the fact that every human has these patterns of consciousness, unhealthy patterns. For example, greed, selfishness, negativity, polarization. We're all operating through these unconscious patterns of consciousness. If we continue down that route, and continue where we're going at the moment, then it's not going to be a great outcome. But if we can somehow turn ourselves around, and enough people do, then maybe the 100th monkey syndrome, and then maybe something else will be created. And coming back to Michael Rhodes' books, it was very interesting. It was, I think it was his book, Journey into Oneness, which I came across the books in my storage unit about a couple of months ago, and I haven't read them for 20 years. And so I got them out again, and it was just perfect timing for what I needed to read right now. And he, in this book, I think, it could be it's either Into a Timeless Realm or Journey into Oneness, I can't remember, but he goes on these interdimensional journeys, so to speak, which are real, they're not imagined.
Yes.
And
yeah, I get that.
he sees these, I know you do, and he sees these alternative realities, and he sees good ones with good outcomes and really awful ones. And one of them, I don't know if you've the film The Fifth Element. Did you ever watch that?
I have watched it. Yeah.
With Bruce Willis, and it starts with him in his apartment, but apartments are very different. They're sort of probably a bit similar to what these high-rise apartments in China look like now, but just that he's in his apartment, and there are these flying cars outside policing everything, and they can't, everything is locked, and they're in like a little set. When I say apartment, it's like a cell, sort of fly. And it's an incredible film, actually. But the picture that Michael Rhodes sort of describes in this book is very much like out of that film.
Yeah.
And he says, describes other things as well, which are really quite shocking, in terms of genetic engineering, of the outcome of genetic engineering of modification of animals. Just really horrendous. But that is just one option. So it comes back to, as far as I can understand, us making the changes. And that is why, for example, my teacher is just so, and all spiritual teachers, actually, they're all saying the same thing, and they've been saying it for decades. Need to meditate, need to go inwards, you need to stop looking outwards into the external world, bring your senses inwards, and then you will connect with a completely new reality.
Yes.
But even though I say this, one of the biggest challenges for me has been to do just that.
Yeah.
Some people find it quite easy. I do not find it easy. And that is my patterns, probably, resisting, the false self, resisting.
Yeah.
So I know that it's not an easy thing to do.
No, it isn't. And I had to really train my body to relax to be able to do it, to sit and meditate, because, like you, I was trained that we work hard, and you don't sit around. And, for me to sit and meditate, it was like, oh God, what if somebody turns up and sees me just sitting here doing nothing? That can't be done. Like, you can't do that. So it took me a long time to really just be okay with doing that and having time to do that, like slotting that in as a thing for me. So yeah, it is an important thing. And I noticed when I actually did do it regularly and disciplined, it was amazing, the information that came through. It was just like, the universe says, okay, yeah, she's putting this time aside each day. Let's give her as much as we can and keep her enthusiastic enough to, the enthusiasm there to keep her there, and returning. So it is an important thing. But I also know the time that I was going through a very, very much like a death throw, my whole identity shifted out, and I was in like a birthing canal, which I see now. At the time, I was just in a black pit for 9 months. And couldn't find the ledge, the top to get out. It was like, oh my God, it was horrible. And everything fell away, my income, everything I had to really trust. And I'm still feeling like now I'm still recreating myself into that newness, from that time back there. But in that space there, I couldn't meditate. I knew that that was going to be the best thing for me, is sit in gratitude. I had no gratitude for anything. I was middle finger up, like, and meditation and quietness, stillness would have been the best thing for me, but I just couldn't do it. It wasn't going to happen then. It did gradually later on towards the end of it, but when I was in it, no. So it's funny, the things that we need to do for ourselves sometimes are just not.
Oh, I know. It is. It's like fall down, get up, fall down. It's like learning to walk every day.
Yeah. And, just thinking about that world that you were talking about in that Bruce Willis, I might watch that again at some point, but it's like Shanghai, that was that world then, the drones flying around the top of the buildings to keep them in their apartments, the robot dogs running around the bottom, keeping them in there, was shocking. It's like, this is such a craziness. But it's been happening, and it is still, as far as I know, they're still not freed and out. But shocking. It's just shocking.
If we were to know all the terrible things that are going on in the world, like everything in one go, I'm sure we would just die from.
Totally.
Yeah. I don't know what the word
pain.
is.
It's hurt. It's pain and grief. I know through that time, so many of those in, what we might call our industry, I don't know, but the truth seekers, I suppose, those who were really finding the true information, it was too painful. I know I'd get to that point too, Kim, where I'd say, okay, enough now. Enough. I have to do something else, look at something else, because it was
you have to take a break.
Big dark rabbit holes. And I just thought, no, it's not healthy. And bringing it, I mean, it triggered a lot of the old that I needed to go back into. It took me back into, when have I felt like that before? Oh yeah, like this time, so it activated a lot of old cellular that I needed to clear, which was wonderful. But it's not fun to look at it all the time, for sure.
No, and probably not healthy as well. I mean, some people get really caught on it. You've only got to look at social media channels, especially Telegram channels, and people are just caught up in it. It seems like 24 hours a day, and I don't think that's healthy.
Well, what we put our energy to, and I'll say this to anybody, if there's somewhere that you're plugged into that you're finding, is not like that, not healthy for you, not good for you in any way, then unplug, find something else. But it's not always the easiest thing, like we're saying, to do that. But because what you put your energy into, you're empowering. So what we might not want that we're looking at in the world, but we're actually empowering it by even acknowledging it's there in many ways. So I when I reminded myself about that, it was like, no, I don't want to empower that. I'm not even going to look at it. And I started focusing more on what I wanted to create into my world. What did I want my world to be? And I have a lot of inner peace now, a lot of calm around me. It's like that world's out there, but that's not my immediate world at all. It's just not. And I'm thankful for that. It's like, God, thank God. we moved on a bit.
Goes being in the world, but not of it.
Yes, absolutely. And that's a piece in itself. And I can get called in, like I called into the playgrounds. If I want to, I can go in and play in there, but I just choose not to now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think it would be good if more people were doing that and understood it, but too many people are still plugged in.
They are, definitely. Yeah. definitely that. I was also, one of the things that I sort of focus on too is being in the body of the great body that's ascending. If we look at ourselves being a part of the body of this greatness, and we are all a cell in that body in a sense, then I want this cell that I am to be the best that it can be, to build a better body in a sense in that, and to assist that ascension, descension state. But yeah, we just get hauled into all sorts of different areas around life, don't we? And we're taken on journeys. And how are you and your family? Like, Kim, did you have, I know a bit of our family sort of split up over the years. In that time, did you have support? And, have you sort of got family and friends that support? You've definitely got friends, but.
Well, my family are in the UK, and so we're a little bit estranged, really, because I don't go there that often. But let's just say I'm the only one in my family who thinks the way I do.
Right. Yeah, me too. It's quite interesting, really, isn't it? There's been a few others come on board, I've noticed, a few cousins and people, but no, I'm that girl. But it's interesting how eventually, I know with my immediate family, there were many, of course, as I'm saying, that I had to sort of just let go of, in a sense, recognizing that I sound like a loony when I'm trying to, tell them what's really going on, or if they were asking any questions, which they weren't really. It was me just trying to, get them to understand. And then I realized that actually I'm like this, religious preacher, really, that's saying that this is the way and you need to go this way. And I started backing off. It was like, no, I haven't got the right to do that to anybody now. So yeah, I started hauling it in a bit and just getting on with me.
Yeah, I did. At the beginning, I tried, subtly to explore, and see if they could see things differently. But it was very clear that they didn't want to, and that actually it was going to cause harm if I tried to push my opinion forward anymore. And so I completely backed off. And that's just been the best solution, really. And it is, we all make our choices, and we're where we're at, and we have to respect where everyone is at, which is one of the most difficult things to do sometimes.
Yeah, for sure.
But it's and it's for me personally, then it's about my job of learning to be more open and accepting and compassionate and loving and la la la. That's
la la la. I know, that was me. It was like, just have compassion for everywhere, for everyone, and wherever it is they're at, and that's been working for me. It's, I feel a lot lighter and a lot freer, I suppose, and things seem to be flowing a lot quicker and easier because I'm not being taken off track, sort of, pulled into different vibrational stuff that I'm really not keen on. So yeah, it does help for sure. Is there anything else, Kim, that you would like to share with us? Like, are you working with clients and you've got, what's going on for you? What's next for Kim?
Yeah, well, that's a great question, because, which I don't have a full answer to.
Yeah.
As I said, the last 3 years have been quite a lot of change, and I'm still in that change. I'm in that process of whatever is happening, where you're sort of in the middle of it and you haven't quite come out the other side. And because it's winter here, for me, it's really important to move with the seasons. And so because it's winter, I'm very consciously being more inward and doing less, July, August at the moment. And also I just finished a big production, so to speak, of my bigger picture series, which was a whole year really from start to finish. I wasn't working on it for a year. For the first 6 months I was thinking, shall I even do it? Can I even do it? It's so big, it's beyond my scope of knowledge. and then realize, well, that's, you need to invite somebody to do it with you who has the missing piece of knowledge, which was about the ageless wisdom teachings. And so then I reached out 6 months later, and then we literally were working on it for 6 months. So that was my full focus. And then now my focus is just stepping back a bit, but still working my bread and butter, so to speak, is my one-to-one clients.
Yeah.
And I enjoy that, just really helping people to make really positive change in as short a time as possible. And that's my main focus at the moment. And I need to give some attention to my websites, which are so out of date, because I keep on putting the updates on the back burner. It's like, no, there's something more important to do.
Yeah, I get it.
Yeah, so my focus, sort of my next thing, apart from taking it easy over winter and also having some fun, doing more sort of fun social things, because that tends to also get put a bit on the back burner with me, is getting clearer on what I want to offer people in a one-to-one way. And then at some point, probably another group online program of some sort, because I do really enjoy putting those together. The only thing is they're just so much work, and they don't really pay their way.
No.
But I enjoy doing them. So for me, it just tends, what I do next tends to come spontaneously, in a moment of like, oh yeah, that's what I want to do. So that's, and I'm tending to not look so much, not that I ever was very good at it. I was, some people, they're very good at planning, 5-year plan, 10-year plan, and I've just never been very good at that. And I see pros and cons to both. But especially now, I feel, since what's happened in the last 3 years, I feel it even more, that it's difficult to plan, because there's still this feeling in the background of, well, what could happen and what is going to happen. And I'm sure something is, I don't know what it is. And for example, for me, travel was always really important. Ever since I was 6 years old when I got on a plane by myself for the first time, and I just love traveling. But at the moment, I don't really have a desire to travel. It's very strange, and it comes along with this change that I've been going through. Of, I don't know, just everything is changing in terms of what I want. Things that I used to love doing, I'm no longer interested in. So then it's leaving a big gap of, well, what do I fill it with? Maybe I don't fill it with anything. But definitely things have been dropping away. So I'm sort of navigating my way through, well, what do I want? What do I want to do in the next 1 to 5 years?
We've I know I was exhausted at the point of thinking about how I do this again, because it was like this stop happened, and it was like, for me anyway, and I'm sure it was like this for many, is that it totally changed. I mean, it changed our whole worlds, but it also showed up, like people had different purposes show up. They were now recognizing that, hang on a minute, I'm now being called to do this, so there was a lot of change in the way that we were all driving our lives and where we thought we were heading. And as I was coming out of that death row and into recreating myself again, it was like I just started with a bit of momentum into that. And then we had the big lockdown and the shutdown and everything stopped. And it was like, oh my goodness. Then you go down all the rabbit holes. That takes a bit of energy, all the stuff that was going on, and adjusting ourselves to, okay, this is how it's rolling now. And it's only just in the last sort of like few months really that I feel like we've really got a green light, and that we can really start really bringing things into life that we want happening. But I just felt exhausted to think that I had to start again. You know, it's like, it was like starting from scratch again. It was like, oh my God, now I have to build up my, you know, clientele, all the stuff. It was quite big. And I know many that were feeling the same way, that, you know, I don't know if I can do this all again, but it's doing it differently. And however that works, I don't know. We're just finding our way through it, really, aren't we? Day by day.
Yeah, I mean, it is interesting because I totally relate to what you're saying, but I didn't have that experience. I actually, looking back now, I can see that I was unknowingly preparing myself and being prepared for what happened.
Yeah.
For example, I remember the couple of years before, I really shifted gears a lot in my work to working more with consciousness and transformation of consciousness through the Ren Shui practices, because there are particular methods for working on cultivating the heart consciousness and dismantling these unhealthy patterns of consciousness. And I've been putting a lot of focus on them and running programs on those. And I'd sort of been questioning myself at the time, going, why am I doing this? I'm a health coach. I help people sort their health problems. Why am I doing that? And then it all sort of started to make sense. And then also I'd gone through quite a difficult personal time the 3 years before, 4 years, even maybe more than that, 4 or 5 years.
Yeah.
Eventually, because I'd got myself into some debt which I'd never experienced before, because the main modality that I'd been delivering, all of a sudden it just disappeared overnight, and so I couldn't deliver it anymore, and it had been 90% of my income, and so overnight my income disappeared. And then I was trying to sort of sort myself out and work out what the heck to do and how to earn a living. And in the throes of that, got myself into debt, and then had to really look at, okay, well, what's going on here? What's the lesson here? Why am I in so much fear and stress? And then that took me down a pathway of healing birth trauma, and you know, because that was at the root of the real fear that was going on inside of me. And then that took me down also then a pathway of really learning to trust despite the circumstances. So no matter what is happening, cultivating what I call indomitable trust.
Yes.
Internally. And that was actually what got me out of debt, because I tried so many ways to get more work, get a second job, do this, do that, and none of it was working. And then I just turned inwards and said, okay, what do I need to change inside of me? And I just focused fully for several months just on this trust issue. And everything started changing as a result. And then in February 2020, I cleared the debt, and it was significant. It was 70 grand. It was, I'd never been in debt ever.
Yeah.
And that was February 2020, paid it off. March 2020, boom, lockdown. And I was like, okay, I went through that so that I could learn to help other people get through scary times.
Yeah. And it is totally about trust. It is totally the trust thing. And so, you know, in the time that I had that burnout on that death throw, I thought it was a burnout, but I see now it was a rebirthing and a birth, letting go of the old character and the old way of working in this world, you know. And like, I can imagine your mum and dad worked very hard, and you know, you work hard for everything you get. It's the program. And you know, like, I knew I couldn't sit around doing nothing. If I was caught sitting around doing nothing, oh my goodness.
Me too, yeah.
You know, this driving, you're just driven by those sort of that conditioning. And I know I was working all the hours that I could, still not getting ahead financially. It seemed everything that I was bringing in was just going somewhere else. You know, it was like, oh my goodness. And it was just such a you know, oh God, I remember it felt like I was towing these 2 big trucks behind me even, you know, trying to keep going. And I just remember saying, I can't keep doing this like this. Where, you know, what is it that I need to know, understand, put into play that's going to make this easier for me? Because this is working hard for money. I was working for money. Money wasn't working for me in any way. So it was this whole thriving, survival, thrive thing. It was like I was surviving. I needed to get into the thriving. And through that death row, through coming through that, I had no desire to do it the way I was doing it before. There was absolutely no desire. And I thought, okay, I'm not going to do any of this anymore. You know, the whole, all of everything that I do, what my business is. I thought that I'd never be doing it again. But here I am doing it again, but in a different way. It just all started clicking in differently. And it's with such ease now. There's no pushing anything, forcing it. It just all flows. It's just this continual flow of abundant, beautiful stuff. And that was my last attempt. It was like, if I don't get this time, you know, because I've been trying to get it for many years. Why am I in lack? Why am I still struggling? It was like, God, and I knew the way it was supposed to work. And that was what was so frustrating, was that I just kept tripping myself up and going into old stuff all the time, the old way of doing it. So yeah, it takes a bit, but man, it's good when it clicks and you know, you're not in that just trudging along, trying to make it all work. So yeah, and I sort of feel like this, you know, lots more people will be falling into or finding or tripping up on that and finding their way through it into a new way of being, really, and allowing our higher being to, or our true self to lead us, instead of this thing here that keeps taking us on these jaunts, believing we have to learn something more. No, we don't. We know it. We've been here so many times, done the same thing over and over. There's nothing more to learn, really. It's just, you know.
I think I've got a lot to learn myself. But I think, you know, I think greed is one of the major issues in the world. And for example, I remember before the lockdown, my Facebook feed was filled with, you know, personal development coaches or business coaches.
Yes.
Or saying, you know, make your next million. This is how you can make $1 million in a month and whatever. And it was just all about the money.
Yeah. And
I've never resonated very well with that, although it's nice to have, you know, enough money in the bank to feel good and safe and be able to pay for what you need to pay for. But I noticed that there was a big drop in that sort of attitude as a result of COVID. You know, people did stop spending a lot more, because we were getting, I mean, it was totally out of hand, and it still is in a way, but really, really out of hand with how people, you know, buying just so much unnecessary stuff. But when I see there's still business coaches out there talking about the money, and the thing is, it's not about the money. That's not the first thing that we need to be looking at.
No.
And you know, when I went through these sort of 3 or 4 years of this really intense time with money, what was really interesting was noticing, and it still happens, how the money comes when you need it from all sorts of weird and wonderful, unexpected directions. And you just got to stay in the trust.
Yes.
And, you know, sometimes I wouldn't have the money for the rent, but I just had to trust that somehow it would turn up, you know, a week later or something. And it did.
Yeah.
And sometimes there were times when I had $5 in my bank account, and I would go into a shop just to get $1 loaf of bread, because that was all I could afford.
Yeah.
It was a very strange and sometimes at times stressful time. But the key was learning to stop the worrying and stop what I call the worst case scenario thinking of, you know, imagining the worst case scenario happening.
Absolutely.
Stop the fear and all that negativity, and to grow and recultivate this inner feeling of trust.
Yes.
It's the absolute key. And I've still got a way to go with it. You know, it's not like I'm perfected it, but definitely made progress.
Yeah, beautiful.
But yeah, it's like, you know, these 5 treasures, as I said, none of them are about money. That's what we should be after, and yet the world has been run, you know, all about the economy and
Yes.
the financial markets, and everybody's been literally programmed into thinking that success equals money or money equals success.
Yes.
And it is so not the truth.
No, it's not. And it's a false set of security, isn't it? The money. I mean, it can go tomorrow. It could be, you know, it's just,
That's
it's
right.
not about that. Totally not
And
about
it doesn't matter if you can have none or you can have heaps. People are still worrying about, well, what if I lose it?
Yes.
Which is the scarcity consciousness.
Yeah, for sure.
Mm.
Yeah. No, it's an incredible place to be at this time and on the planet anyway, and in these bodies. You know, there's a lot to learn and there's a lot to experience. And yeah, it's just finding the joy in the day, whatever the day is. It's finding some sort of joy in it, and just loving people, really loving it as much as possible. Thank you so much for coming in, Kim.
Thank you. I hope it was useful or helpful in some way.
Yeah, very much so. No, there's lots of little gold nuggets in there, and all the very best with everything that you're doing, and stay wrapped up and warm. Obviously you will. There's a bit of snow down there now, isn't there?
Well, I'm not in Queenstown, I'm in Christchurch, so there's no snow here at the moment, but it is cold.
Yeah. We feel it up here, way up in the top of the North Island. We feel it when it's snowing down there. I know when it's snowed.
Yes.
Beautiful. Well, you take good care. All the very best, and much, much love to you.
Thank you. Likewise. Thank you.
Welcome. Thank you.